During last week's General Committee meeting at the Barrie City Hall, the city's ongoing discussions regarding bike lane implementation and safety measures in designated areas took center stage. City officials are examining the possibility of adding bike lanes similar to those on Livingston Street in certain outlined areas. The goal is to enhance safety for cyclists by incorporating curbs or other forms of separation, although it remains unclear if this can be achieved on the specific roads in question. City staff will conduct a thorough investigation and report back with their findings. In addition to exploring separated bike lanes, staff have been instructed to investigate alternative safety measures and provide a detailed costing analysis for implementing separated bike lanes on existing roads. This analysis will help determine if there are any additional costs associated with implementing separated bike lanes for Duckworth and Grove Streets. City staff will continue their research into the feasibility and cost of implementing separated bike lanes on different road types and provide updates to the General Committee as they become available.
Welcome to this General Committee meeting this evening. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent items, I will read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss the matter further. If an item is not held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and it will go forward to the next City Council meeting for considerations. 4.1, the referred by motion 23-G-066, City Council on March 29, 2023, the request for civic address change 67 Owen Street, Ward 2.
Hold, please.
That is held by Deputy Mayor Thompson. For the reports of reference advisory or special committees, 5.1, the report of the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee dated March 29, 2023, to be received. Councillor Harvey, could you provide an overview of the matters dealt with at that meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Committee met on April 29th. The committee first received a presentation from the Director of Internal Audit. She reported on the 2022 internal audit and provided a detailed report to accompany the presentation. In 2022, her team reviewed integrated project billable rates for Phase 2 project vendors in regards to the Operations Centre redevelopment, also billable rates for the Allendale Transit Mobility Hub, Ontario Ministry of Transportation Driver Certification Program, Accounts Payable, PC card and expense reimbursement, along with fraud and wrongdoing program oversight. Recommendations were made in regard to some of the processes, and an internal audit work plan for 2023 was presented and is contained in Appendix D of the report. Committee also received a presentation and report from the Investment Management Committee, which is comprised of several local professionals that donate their time to oversee the investments of our city. The city's portfolio is comprised of 3 different funds: the Operating Fund, the Capital Fund, and the Growth Fund. Collectively, the 2022 total return was 1.59%, or $6.17 million on an average portfolio of $389 million. During this same time, just to show you how well this group did, the NASDAQ saw a loss of 33.5%, S&P a loss of 19.4%, and the S&P TSX composite was down 8.7%, which just goes to show you that 1.59 gain is quite an impressive feat. Committee also discussed correspondence submitted by the Barrie Farmers Market in regards to the permanent market, along with their summer mobile market financial request. This matter was deferred to the next meeting, providing both staff and the farmers market more time to report back on specifics to committee. Committee supported correspondence from the February 15th circulation list, which was referred to committee concerning the Freshwater Action Plan Fund. Committee supported a resolution and sending a copy of it to the Federal Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, along with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, the Treasury Board, and several MPs along with the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority. The letter indicates Council's support for federal funding for Lake Simcoe, which represents a significant percentage of the overall Freshwater Action Plan Fund. We requested federal funding for several city initiatives in regards to shoreline mitigation, stream restoration, and stormwater quality management, upgrades to the municipal infrastructure such as wastewater treatment and stormwater management facilities, the planting of 250,000 trees in the watershed, and finally the purchase and conservation of more forests and wetlands within the Lake Simcoe Conservation Regional Authority to make significant progress towards the Lake Simcoe Production Program goal of 40% of the watershed area being natural land. And that is my report.
That was a very good report, Councillor Harvey. And this is one of the changes that's come through our committee structure changes, is that we'll have these reports from the committees to provide a little bit more detail about what's happening, because oftentimes what comes through our committees ends up just getting approved and we aren't providing the information to the public. So I think this is actually very helpful. I was in the meeting and it was still helpful for me. So not sure what that says about my my readiness for the meeting. We're now going to move through the items one by one that were referred or approved in that meeting, and then we'll move on to the affordability where we'll have an update from Councillor Nixon. So FRG1, the 2022 year-to-date internal audit status report, 2022 fraud and wrongdoing program activity, and the 2022 summary of internal audit activity, and the 2023 internal audit work plan. That's approved on consent. The 2022 Investment Management Annual Report. That's approved on consent. FRG, the referred by motion 23-G-006, correspondence from the circulation list dated January 11th regarding the Barrie Farmers Market. It's approved on consent. Referred by motion 23-G-016, memorandum from circulation list dated January 25th concerning an update on the permanent market. That's approved on consent. FRG 5, referred by motion 23-G-047, correspondence from the circulation list dated February 15th concerning the Freshwater Action Plan Fund. That's approved. FRG 6, free transit for seniors. You did forget about that one, which is for an additional day in the week for free transit for seniors. We'll now go to 5.2, the report of the Affordability Committee dated April 5th, 2023, to be received. Councillor Nixon, can you please provide an overview of the matters that were dealt with at that meeting?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Wednesday, April 5th, the meeting was called to order at 6 p.m. All members of Council and Mayor Nuttall were present, and the meeting was chaired by myself. We also had 13 senior members of staff present. Our first presentation was regarding the application for an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendments and draft plan of subdivision 320 and 364 Mapleview Drive West and 664, 674, and 692 Esser Road. The first presentation regarding this was presented by Simon Yee of IBI Group. And then immediately following that, Andrew Gamero, Senior Planner, provided an update concerning the status of the application. We had one member of the public come down with the verbal comments. 3 written comments were also submitted. The second presentation was regarding application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision 175 and 199 Esser Road and 50 Wood Street. James Hunter of Innovative Planning Solutions presented a presentation regarding that, and following that, Celeste Ketsemetri, Senior Planner, provided an update concerning the status of the application. We had 9 verbal comments. 9 citizens voiced their comments and concerns. And we also had 9 written comments as well. So it was a busy evening. The meeting adjourned at 8:45 p.m. Not a little longer than this evening's Affordability Committee, but they do go on. And again, the meeting adjourned at 8:45. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon, and thank you for the update. There are no motions that came through the committee from that evening, so we're going to move on to staff reports. So the first staff report is DEV 019-23, cycling lane implementation, Grove Street and Dunlop Street, Blake Street, wards 1 and 2.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Ritma. The next item is DEV 021-23, confidential litigation matter, Ontario Land Tribunal appeal for Essa Road.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Negussi. Next is EMT 002-23, the 2022 Budget and Business Plan Year-End Report.
Hold, please.
That's held by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Next is FIN 003-23, the 2023 tax rates. That's approved on consent. Next is FIN 004-23. This is the 2023 Barrie Business Association levy.
Hold.
That's held by Councillor Morales. Next is FIN 005-23, Capital Plan Forecast Adjustments.
Mayor Nuttall, I would like to hold this one and not hold the other one, actually.
So you want to
Let it go.
you want to take your finger off the button on that one? Okay. Give me one moment here. So was there any other member of council who wanted to hold EMT 002-23, the 2022 Budget and Business Plan Year-End Report? No? Okay. So that's approved on consent, and we've held the capital plan forecast adjustments, which is FIN 005-23. Next is FIN 012-23. That's approved on consent. Oh.
Yeah, we have to. Jen should hold that to go on camera. Yeah, because it's a staffer.
Okay, if that's not held, then it's approved on consent. LCS 007-23, establishing a lobbying registry and appointment of a lobbyist registrar.
Hold, please.
Deputy Mayor Thompson, you're busy tonight.
I might let that one go.
I guess I'll need someone else to hold it then. LCS 009-23, confidential personal information matter, the appointment of the International Relations Committee.
Hold, please.
Councillor Harris.
Let it go.
Okay. And that concludes. We have the items for discussion. Madam Clerk would deal with at this point as well. 8.1, invitation to present to Council, Simcoe County District Health Unit, that the Simcoe County District Health Unit be invited to provide a presentation to City Council concerning an update on the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit activities. And that's sponsored by Councillor Kunkel. Are there any hold on that, or is that approved on consent? That's approved on consent. An invitation to present to Council in 8.2 and this is the Barrie Sports Hall of Fame. That the Barrie Sports Hall of Fame be invited to provide a presentation to City Council concerning the Barrie Sports Hall of Fame mandate and activities. This is put on by Councilor Negussi. Is anyone wanting to hold this, or is this approved on consent? It is also approved on consent. We will now go back to the held business for the evening. We'll start with the deferred business, which is motion 23-G-066, which was held by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed with an amendment. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the chief and the deputy chief. They've spent a ton of time with this file, and I appreciate that. You know, trying to find a solution to a much needed development, and with Balla's team as well. I really do appreciate all the time. So my amendment is that the single street address be assigned to Traditions Senior Housing Limited Development at 67 Owen Street unless the following conditions are met. I've shortened it up a little bit, and it's just the entire structure shall meet all requirements established in the Ontario Building Code. There was some suggested wording, as you guys have, but I just think that I'm not a building officer, and I believe between the building officer, our senior engineers, and fire and all that can work all this out, and I just don't think we should wordsmith motions at council that kind of restrict negotiations between those departments. And then two, upon the conditions in paragraph 1 being met, that traditional senior housing limited shall be permitted to be assigned 2 street addresses to the single building being developed at 67 Owen Street, notwithstanding council's approval, street addressing policy and private street name policy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the motion on the floor? Councillor Kungle?
I have one that's just a point of clarification, because perhaps I'm reading just the use of unless in the context of the first sentence as negating the conditions we want to have done. So could we just take a quick peek at that? I could just be misunderstanding it, but I keep reading it and I keep pausing that when it states that the single street address be assigned unless the following conditions are met. I know it's a positive, but I could also see it being interpreted the other way as almost a condition against it. So could we wordsmith or take a friendly in some way, Deputy Mayor Thompson, just to further clarify the use of unless to maybe a different word? So pending or the following.
Yeah, the word like unless the conditions are met or pending the condition met, I'm okay with either or.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's just me wordsmithing in time, because I was looking at the
Yeah.
potential for it to be read without the intention.
Yeah, I'll take that as a miss.
Deputy Mayor Thompson, when I read this, the first piece where it says unless the following conditions are met, which is essentially just the entire structure shall meet all requirements established in the Ontario Building Code. In the first part of that, it said it is to be given a single address unless A is completed. And then 2 goes into the circumstances for 2 addresses. So I think that is the intention, Councillor Kungle, that if the conditions aren't met, then it's only 1 address. But if the conditions are met, then it's 2 addresses.
Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah.
Yep, then that's fine. It can remain.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And it's approved. That's the amendment, I believe, and we will now vote on the main motion. All those in favor? And it's approved. We'll now move on to DEV 019-23. This is a cycling lane implementation, Grove Street and Dunlop Street, Blake, wards 1 and 2. Councillor Ritma, you held the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll put it on the floor as printed, and I have an addition to it. and I can speak to that. So the addition that I'm suggesting is that we add a small paragraph to the end of it that staff in development services report back to General Committee concerning the feasibility to accelerate the implementation of separated cycling facilities, including separated cycling facilities on Grove Street from Johnson Street to Bayfield Street and on Duckworth Street from Grove to St. Vincent. This has been the subject of a fair bit of discussion with our engineers and with Councillor Nixon and the clerk. So I thank everybody for working so hard to put this together. The main portion of the of the motion just changes our parking structure around Blake Street and Grove Street with respect to the cycling bike lanes that are going on those two streets. We've had a fair bit of discussion because Grove Street and Duckworth both are going under construction, and there will be some major construction work done there. And you'll recall that a couple of meetings ago, we asked staff to take a good hard look at revising our standards for streets. In particular, bike lanes, because at the moment, for example, we have bike lanes on Grove Street, but no mother in their right mind would let their 5-year-old ride their bike there because it's just way too dangerous right beside the traffic. And the other part of it is we've always been looking at slowing traffic down, and if the lane is wide and there's a bike lane there, it doesn't effectively slow down traffic because the bike lane still serves as part of the driving lane for the car. So the intention here with this addition is to ask staff to have a look at it if we can redesign these roads to put the bike lane above the curb. We've had a lot of discussion about it. The contracts have been let for both of these streets, and it may not be possible. Well, it certainly isn't possible immediately, but staff have said that they will have a good hard look at it and come back to us in about 3 months or so and give us some ideas and be able to check to see what any design constraints there might be, and also give us some idea if there's any additional costs involved. So that's all that amendment does, and I think it will serve us well as we look forward to changing some of our road cross sections especially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rittma. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the amendment on the floor for staff to investigate? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Manetto. Just really one question of clarification, and one of the comments Councillor Rittma made. I just wanted to clarify with staff, because as we continue to invest in bicycling lanes and infrastructure, I just want to be sure that we're clear on what cycling lanes do or they don't do. So maybe through you, Manetto, to staff, the comment that adding bike lanes does not reduce speed of traffic. Can you clarify what the evidence says on that?
Through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Harris. I'll have to get back to you on the specific empirical data on that. It does help, but it doesn't help as much as physically moving in the curbs. Councillor Rittma correctly stated, you still have the perception of the wider platform. So great. So if I'm getting it correctly, it does help, but obviously a greater help. There's other type of cycling lanes that provide greater safety, but there is a slight reduction in vehicle speeds with the bike lanes being in place. It does help to create some friction on the roadway.
Thank you. That's all. Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments with regards to the motion? I have a quick one, Councillor Rittma, because so when you're talking about the bike lane being lifted up, right, which is what we've talked about as a council, is the idea that you would want the road then narrowed, and then lifted up on top? Or is it the road stays where it is, and then a bike lane's put outside of the current width of the road?
The intention is that we would narrow the driving lane and put the bike lane above the curb, on the upside of the curb. And that serves to, it does a couple of things. That narrows the road and slows down traffic and provides greater safety on the bike lane. And the real advantage is that it does not require us to acquire any more property, because if you leave the lanes as wide as they are now, and then you want to put a bike lane in, you need more property.
And that was my concern. I know the area really, really, really well. and I didn't see any property to be able to be expropriated, quite frankly. So I guess my question through to our public service on this would be, there's obviously been an engineering for this project completed at this point. Are there drains or sewers or things that are currently designed to be on the outside of the bike paths, or are those mostly down the center of the road?
To you, Mayor Nuttall, the underground infrastructure is both under the road and in some cases under the boulevard.
With regards to, if we're thinking about storm runoff, currently there's going to be some infrastructure in place that takes the water off the road and goes down. So if we narrow the road, is that all now going to be out of kilter?
Mayor Nuttall, yeah, that would require like a redesign of the stormwater infrastructure if we were to narrow the traveling surface. Yeah.
And that's why it's not able to be done. Obviously, there's the amount of work that's going to be done this year on road resurfacing, et cetera.
That's correct. So on Duckworth and Grove, obviously we've tendered both the contracts, and one of them has already been awarded. So those contracts have to move forward as designed. I think what this will do is it'll look at how we can accelerate separated bike lanes in the future along these routes. What would be the implications, what would be the challenges, and what would be some of the costs and some of the timing issues. And that's what we would report back on.
Okay. So in principle, I completely support this. I think that if we'd had this conversation, a year ago, before the engineering was done, and, at a first glance, the costs, et cetera, don't seem to be out of whack, then it's something that I think would make total sense, quite frankly. I think one of the concerns that has been coming up, because as we put the bike lanes in, is that most of these bike lanes are going on main roads, right? And I'm going to apologize to Councillor Kungle in advance because of the active transportation and all of this, which makes sense because it's the most efficient, effective route. But it's not safe, to Councillor Rittma's point. And I asked a question in speaking with some of our senior servants today. It's like, has anyone ever seen anyone on a bike path? I've seen myself on it. I don't know if I've seen anyone else on them. And the reason is not because people don't use bicycles, and it's not because they don't want to. It's because they don't feel safe doing it, right? And so I admire the goal on this. Based on the length of time it's taken to get the resurfacing of these roads done, I'm guessing it's a 20-year time period, which would be the lifespan of these roads, I'm guessing. Is that about how often we would redo these roads? 10 years at a minimum. We hope for 50. And so we're talking about as far as where I'm sitting, it's a minimum 10-year window before we would actually be able to look at this in a way that would make sense in terms of efficient use of tax dollars. So I guess, you know, for me, what are we asking staff to do here in terms of reporting back immediately in the next 3 months, I think is probably better aligned with when works are taking place in the future on these streets, that this be part of the design. And so I don't know if there's an amendment around the table on that, but I really do think that we're wasting staff's time, because we're not going to tell them to go rip it up and change the engineering and tell the contractors not to do the work. We're just not going to do that. So if there's a goal here, which I support, like, let's align it with the next phase of construction, that's going to happen on these streets, so it's done in an efficient manner.
And I agree with that 100%, Mr. Mayor. The only caveat that I would put to that is that we are doing mostly underground work now, and the surface work will be done next year. So there may be an opportunity that we may be able to, you know, make some adjustments in the design for the next year. So I would be inclined to continue to ask staff to have a look at it, and if they come back in a couple of months and say it doesn't make any sense or it costs so much money or whatever, I'm good with that. But I would like them to have a look at it and give us some advice on it, because I do think that we want to move this forward in general anyway across the city.
No, fair point. Fair point. I didn't realize that, so thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to staff, just a little bit of clarification on Councillor Rietma's comments there about the underground work being done this year and then other work being done next year. But then the earlier comment was made about contracts already being awarded and stuff. So with the motion worded in the fashion that it currently is, does it impact these contracts that have already been awarded? Because obviously we would have been fairly deep down the rabbit hole in design and everything if contracts have already been awarded.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. So the one contract has been awarded. The other one has been tendered. We received the tenders, and we're in the process of awarding it. The one clarification I have to make is that each road segment is a little different. So on Grove Street, we are primarily focusing on the underground infrastructure with just resurfacing or reconstruction of the actual road. Whereas on Duckworth Street, it's a full reconstruction. So it might be, you know, what's possible on Grove might be a little different to what's possible on Duckworth. So that's what our report will come back and outline the feasibility on these different road segments. So you can't apply the same rule to all stretches of the roadway. I think each roadway has certain unique characteristics, and depending on the work that's being done, the amount of throwaway costs may not be the same on all stretches of the road. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, great, thank you. I'll leave it in staff's hands, but I've just got some concerns that, like you highlighted, Mayor Nuttall, we're now covering up existing infrastructure and having to move stormwater drains and everything else a few feet one way, which is probably into the millions, I'm suspecting. But I'll leave my comments at that.
I have Councillor Corser, then I have Councillor Morales.
Heartbreaking that we can't maybe do what exactly needs to be done, but at this current time, but through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Aranyasundran, I wonder if there's other things that can be put in place, if not while we're doing these I won't say cosmetic, but these changes to the road, to the resurfacing of some of these roads without moving the infrastructure beneath. Like bollards have been used in some areas for bike lanes. There's been temporary curbs put in a slight protection for bike lanes that maybe could be utilized in these areas to give a little more protection for bikers, while actually narrowing the roads and the perception of a driver going down the road to make sure that they actually do slow down, knowing that there is an obstacle on the road to that would make them be more mindful of their driving habits. Is that something that could be looked at or investigated at this time?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kosher, absolutely, that's something we do consider. Obviously, we have to look at the operational impacts, in terms of snow removal, the snow plows, how do they operate in those circumstances. Definitely, it's something that we do look at. Now, I don't think there's any location within the city where we have those bollard-type obstructions. So it is something we look at, but there are certain operational issues that we have to consider. And I'm not sure if, Brett, you wanted to add anything to that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. We can absolutely look at that as part of the report back. One option where you do have bike lanes with a buffer, so we refer to those as buffered bike lanes, that gives us the flexibility to look at things like a flexible bollard as something that is a low impact change that we could look at if other more physical options aren't feasible.
Thank you very much. That's good, because 10, 20, hopefully 50 years seems like an awfully long time to have safe bike lanes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I had to look up the quote to make sure I got it right. And the quote is, "Victory is won in miles, not in inches." And I think Councillor Ritma's motion gets us closer to there. The discussion has been going on for decades. I'm not going to say it started a couple weeks ago, but really getting this to the next step really got there, not just because I did an amendment on some Ward 9 application, because a lot of you jumped in support with comments at the meeting, after the meeting, pushing for. You've seen the emails coming from a couple residents. I've got one more that came in. I'm going to flip it. So this is something that we're getting closer. The reason my amendment to that Ward 9 application was kind of small is I wanted it to pass and just be realistic, and then start in Ward 9, mostly affected Ward 910, and then eventually go to the existing lands. And I said I'd have your back. If we play the tape, I said when you want it in the north, then I'll have your back. So Councillor Ritma, on this, I'll have your back. Shouldn't have emphasized that strongly on this, but I will have your back on this. And again, it might not be that we're reconstructing the asphalt on these roads now, but I want to know what we don't know. And right now, we don't necessarily have a memo that tells us you're looking at X number of $1 million, you're looking at X right of way acquisition per meter, utility problems, loss of tree concerns. We don't have that information yet. So even if we get these reports and part or none of Grove Street or Duckworth get reconstructed in the next decade or two, I think having that information will get us closer. So when we do reconstruct a road, like a Blake Street, like a Sunnydale, it'll allow us to do it much better. So for that, I'll be supporting this amendment, and let's have victory by miles and inches.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Are there any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to staff, when you say the underground work's already being awarded, is that like sewer, water mains?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. I was referring to the stretch on Grove Street between Johnson and Nelson, and it's primarily a water main replacement. And the only road works is just resurfacing for that stretch.
Okay, so they're going to do the water main, which could run up the boulevard, could run up the middle of the road, but the actual surface, like the stormwater, is not
no
being. So that would leave it outside at the curb face, which would be very expensive to narrow it with pups at every. So I'm wondering, I fully support this because I'm a big fan of the bike lanes being separated and for road diet reasons and everything else. I'm wondering if we remove the word accelerate, like the process, let you do a feasibility study because there is a lot of costs, and maybe remove the sections of road, to Councillor Morales' point, that every inch is getting closer to the mile. And I understand that these are major concerns but I think with the feasibility study that staff bring back, I think it'll be applicable to any road, arterial, secondary and stuff. So, like I said, this is your motion. It's just, to Mayor Nodel's point, that this is a lot of money. Like, I could tell you it's a fortune without the staff report because of the existing infrastructure. It's a lot easier on a new build, but I could support it if it was more of a study, going forward to get us closer to a safer cycling network. But I'll leave that up to the mover of the motion.
Are there any other comments or questions with regards to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor? And it carries. We will now go to the main motion. Are there any comments or questions on the main motion? Okay, so I do have comments or questions on the motion. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Kunkel.
No, it's great conversation that's landing at council when we're talking about bike lanes. So, and that delicate balance between, of course, existing infrastructure that we're trying to modify and find our way to invite residents to adopt different modes of transportation, leave the cars behind, but also to then facilitate sharing the road. So, I'll call it a patchwork, and that is not a criticism, but we will continue to see different ways in which, a bike lane continues or discontinues, and we know the plan will take time, and it might look like painted lanes, maybe it'll look like bollards, maybe it'll be raised sides, but I think in complement to this is the intention of how do we make it better and where are there opportunities to explore that conversation. So love the concept of let's not have a missed opportunity if there's a potentially around getting more information to at least inform us and carry the conversation to say this is a reality of probably what we're going to see in the rest of our established neighborhoods, and how do we then look at working with staff to understand what we probably will be dealing with long term in the established neighborhoods. So it's great, tied to our interests about Cycle Barrie and trying to become a designated bike-friendly city in time. So I applaud it. I'll support it. And from there, I think in addition to this, there's always a piece that ties to we won't see people on the road unless we support educating and or helping to maybe manage misperceptions about what I can do on a sidewalk. Can I take the sidewalk if I feel unsafe in this moment? Will I actually get charged or not? And that is not necessarily our messaging, but I think as a system to support active transportation and people using cycle lanes or, connecting wherever it exists, I think there's a big piece behind this around how do we engage residents to do that well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Kunkel. I guess, is there any other comments or questions? So I'm not going to ask the question, it's rhetorical, but how many folks around this table even own bicycles? And so me too. Okay. How many of us, in all seriousness, how many of us use the bike paths, on our main streets in City Barrie? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Really? That's good. We must be the only 4. the bike lanes on the main roads, right? Yes. Right. And so, sorry, Councillor Morales, can I say what you said? Yeah, Councillor Morales says, I don't want to die, right? And that's why Councillor Ripma's motion is, it's right on, right? We have this idea that active transportation, especially in a climate that's changing, becomes more and more feasible every year, that we want to encourage, we want to provide these opportunities to get around the city without motorized or with using bicycles and other types of transportation, these lanes. But the problem is that right now it's just not safe. And I'll be honest with you, I think that, quite frankly, it's kind of my fault. Because the first motion on these bike lanes was Hearst Drive, which was from the Ward 10 councillor back then. And the goal was less about bikes and more about thinning out the road. And it was the only way I could gain the votes to get it through council back in the day. And that's being bluntly honest. We've now used that strategy around the city, right? I've used the Livingston bike lanes. I don't know anyone else who has. Okay? I've used the Duckworth-Cundles bike lanes. I don't know anyone else who has. So, I'm concerned as we go forward here, we're doing more of the same. And to Councillor Rittmer's point, he was trying to do something different, right? I'm concerned about where in the process of those roads it happens, but I'll completely agree with the idea of philosophy behind it. But my question that we need to ask ourselves is, how many more of these do we want to do that don't actually get used? And if the goal is to diet the roads, then let's have that conversation. If the goal is to create bike paths, let's have that conversation. If the goal is to do both, then let's have those conversations. But let's not try to mishmash them into a fake network of bicycle lanes so that we can go out to the public and say, we did bicycle lanes. No, we didn't. We still haven't done it, right? So I don't know what to do with this motion, to be honest with you. I feel like it needs to maybe go to our active transportation committee, and we need to get some feedback on how we achieve what it is we're actually trying to achieve, which is a safe, secure mode of transportation that isn't in a motorized vehicle, that creates exercise, that creates that entire lifestyle that people are looking for in the city of Barrie. And I would guess that one of the things that I'd like to see perhaps is we seem to be really focused on main roads because we're trying to mishmash the dieting of lanes with the bike lanes. I would guess there's lots of opportunities around to create bike paths and active transportation that aren't on main roads. And I'll just throw one at you that I take myself and I go off paths to do it, is, and I can't even remember the name of the road, but between Rose and Grove, right by us, Councillor Kungle, there's a little park with a baseball diamond. I'm not even sure the name of the park. And there's some lawn bowling that happens there. Horseshoes that happens there. I clearly use it all the time. And I cut through there, but there's no path, and I cut through there because it keeps me off of Grove Street. It keeps my kids off of Grove Street. If you put a bike lane on Grove Street, I'm still not taking my kids on Grove Street, right? So there's a bigger conversation, I think, that needs to happen here, and I'm concerned that we're further going down the road of two strategies mixed in one, neither of which will be successful. I open up to comments, and if there is none, I guess we go to the vote.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just echo what you've said. I think that it would be a tragedy if we built more roads and didn't put separated bike lanes on selected roads that we're actually building in the new areas. And I think we have just said in this amendment that to our staff that we would like them to accelerate that very thing that you are talking about. And yes, there is that transition time when we've got roads that we've put on diets and we've got bike lanes adjacent to the pavement. And I hope we don't build any more of those. And then what do we do with the ones that we have? And I think that's a good question to ask our engineers, and that over time we can make those changes as well. So I think it's a time thing.
So do you envision, just to follow up on that, do you envision that if it comes back and our public servants have gone, they've spoken with the contractors, is it then your feeling that we wouldn't proceed with the on-road bike lanes at that point in these areas? Because like, I think that's the bigger conversation. To your point, like, if it comes back and there's no cost differential or it's minimal and the timing all lines up, then we go with the ideal route. If it becomes back cost prohibitive, right, then we're doing more of this.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor, and I think that will be a discussion that we will have to have at that time. If the answer comes back that there is no cost increase, I mean, it's a no-brainer, I think. My suspicion is, as the Deputy Mayor suggests, is it's going to be expensive. Well, then we're going to have to make that decision whether we bite that bullet or we don't. And I suspect we won't, but I think that's a fair discussion to have at that point.
Okay, so there's an amendment that's been approved to ask for feedback on the proposal. There's also a motion that says the cycle lanes be implemented on Grove Street from Bayfield via road right sizing, that the bylaws be put in place to do that. Madam Clerk, when it comes back with this addition, and we approve this as City Council next week, if it comes back within 6 months and it's decided that maybe the bike lanes on the existing road aren't the correct way to go, would we then need 2/3 of council to overturn it, because we'd essentially be going back on something we've already approved within the last 6 months?
Excuse me, Chief Marinetto. Excuse me. If a motion is reconsidered within 6 months, we would have to have a 2/3 majority of council to reopen it. I believe the amendment that Councillor Rietma is asking for is just a portion of what is in paragraph 1, and I want to clarify that with Mr. Anarita Sundam. Sorry.
Sure. To you, Mayor Nuttall, I think the main portion of the reports is requesting approval for implementing these bike lanes along Grove and Blake. So I think if the motions are approved, then we would move forward to implementing these bike lanes. You know, do the no parking signs and then move forward to implementing the bike lane. Where the assessment on the separated bike lane comes in is we are viewing that more as a exercise to assess that for the future. It's possible that, you know, our findings may say, yeah, this can be done very easily at reasonable cost, but that's unlikely, except in maybe specific locations. So that's why we are kind of viewing the futuristic assessment as one that'll give you like the fulsome information on what it will take in terms of time, money, and what kind of challenges we'd have to address to implement separated bikes along these roadways. Obviously, if the assessment comes back and says it can be done easily, then I think we'd be able to change course before some of these bike lanes are actually implemented, if that helps.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you. So we are approving the bike lanes in totality tonight, and if the assessment came back that it could be put in place, then that's one thing. So I'll leave it up to General Committee, obviously. For me, I have concern. Sorry, yeah, Councillor Courser and Councillor Morales. So Councillor Courser and then Councillor Morales.
So just to get some clarity, if I may, Mayor Nuttall, Mr. Nuttall. So tonight we are approving the idea of the possibility of having these, and then staff are going to investigate. They're going to come back with an estimate of how much it would cost to put in bike lanes into these areas. And then at that time, we will once again decide on the fiscal ability to do so.
No, there's two issues now that have been added into one through the amendment. Okay. So the first one that was the motion is for bike lanes in the areas that have been outlined in the report. That would be what we currently have on Livingston, for instance, over in Ward 4. The addition was to see if we could have them done in a way that was a little bit more safe with curbs, etc., or a separation of some kind. Mm-hmm. What we just heard was it's unlikely that that could be part of this specific set of roads right now, but that they would report back and let us know if it is possible. So we are actually, if as a group we approve this tonight, we're approving more of the on-street lanes, not the separated out bike lanes.
Okay, how would we go about asking staff to investigate alternative safe measures as mentioned?
We could have an amendment to say that for sure.
Okay.
I would look, instead of trying to do that myself, I would look to the clerk to be able to provide that recommendation on how to do that.
Because I understand that, fiscally speaking, that this is an exercise in education. So and I'd like to add something to put in alternatives to what we have as basically a painted line on a road, which, yeah. If we can investigate how we can possibly, maybe if it's just seasonal or something that would be protecting cyclists beyond a painted line.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Courser, we could just probably do an amendment that staff investigate alternative safety measures in addition to painted lines and report back via memorandum.
Does that work? Yeah.
So, Councillor Courser, I'm going to interpret that that's on the floor from you. That amendment's on the floor. Is that?
Okie dokie. Yep.
Okay. So there's an amendment on the floor for, I'm just going to Cole's notes it, but a report back, or not a report back, but a memorandum back, which would appear on the circulation list that would outline opportunities to make them more safer, or make them safer. More safer is another thing. Safer.
Yeah, I know they do it, and like I said, I've seen it done in other areas. I don't know, there are different climates, different, geographical areas, different climates, so it might be a different situation in our city, in our snow belt. But yes, I would definitely like to see some investigations done on that, for
what
sure.
What the opportunities are. Yeah. Okay, that amendment's on the floor. Councilor Morales?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. This is a great discussion. Emails just sent, so if everybody can check your inbox. I've been hearing what everybody's trying to do. I had some wording about seizing essentially the implementation of newly painted bike lanes. Like you said, I can't even come close to saying it as effective as you said, Mayor Nuttall. If we're going to do bike lanes, let's do bike lanes that are worth riding on. If we're thinning the road, let's do that. Let's not get to a fail on both ends. So I had some wording, again, like I made the joke earlier, I'm just trying to get it passed. And I was sitting on this wording, banking it for later, but I'm going to go for it now. This is totally based off your amendment right now, Councillor Corser. It's kind of taken into this, but the reason instead of letting that amendment go, instead of the reason, so Mayor Nuttall, I'm doing an amendment to the amendment because I think I'm incorporating it. So I'm going to read out the amendment out loud. That staff report back to General Committee with a costing analysis of separated bike lanes on existing collector, arterial, and higher order roads. Number 2, that staff sees the implementation of new line painted bike lanes on existing arterial, it should just be all roads, on all roads, on all road types yet to be built, whether planned or unplanned, until the memo in section 1 comes back to City Council. So they're tied. They're not just loosey-goosey. Number 3, that if the report finds that there's no additional cost to implement separated bike lanes for Duckworth and Grove, that separate bike lanes be implemented. 99.9 is not going to be the case, but we're putting that in there. And number 4, in the spirit of Councillor Corser's amendment, that if the cost to provide separated bike lanes comes at an additional cost from Section 3, that staff propose to General Committee low-cost safety measures to provide additional protection to the painted bike lanes on Duckworth and Grove Street. So I think it speaks for itself, Mayor Nuttall.
Sorry, could I ask, in the first 3, first 2, you talk about kind of citywide, and then in number 4, it goes back to just those 2 roads?
Correct.
So my question would be, because you're saying in the event that we can't do the actual elevated, separated bike lanes, what are the cost measures? Rather than just for those 2 roads, I would question that on Hearst Drive or on, I think, does Madeline have them?
Painted bike lanes right now.
Painted bike
yes.
lanes? So it might be the same for all of those.
Yes, but the only reason I want to the only reason I want to earmark number 4 to Grove and Duckworth is those are the ones that are on the table.
Okay.
Whereas a road, I'm just going to pick random roads here, Sunnydale, maybe we're still doing the EA in a couple of years. There's opportunities to not do it twice. So we can still get it right in those areas, whereas these ones are on the table. I don't want to close the door. I want to keep it open, and it opens it up for everyone. Now, if at that time and place for these future roads we decide to do the ballers, I know what you're talking about. There's flower planters too that are low rise that can act. If we decide to do that, then so be it. But 4 is essentially achieving Councillor Rietma's intention while still keeping the discussion and not sending it to committee. Nothing against the committee, but there's energy here right now, and it still doesn't slow down everything.
Understood. So can you provide that? It's been emailed. Perfect.
My only edit to the clerk, sorry, is I had, in number 2, I had arterial and freight supported corridors. Let's nix that, which is going for all roads. I'm all in.
So just, we're going to go here and then we'll, yeah.
Mayor Nuttall, we should probably deal with Councillor Corser's amendment first. She can either withdraw it or keep it on the floor and have it voted on, because Councillor Morales's is not, it's more than a friendly.
So, Councillor Morales, we're gonna deal with that, but I'm gonna go to Councillor Corser first because I'm not sure what you're about to say.
I'm making you nervous. I'm not sure what you're about to say. Okay, so number 4, just some wording, that if the cost to provide separated bike lanes comes at an additional cost, that staff propose to General Committee low-cost safety measures to provide additional protection. So there's, it's a little vague about costing.
Was this on Councillor Morales's, what
yes.
you just put forward? Okay,
yes.
So before we do that, I guess
I have to draw mine. I have to withdraw mine.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
if you could withdraw yours.
So if I withdraw, still learning procedure.
That's okay.
If I withdraw my motion, then we can discuss the wording on this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Withdrawn.
Councillor, I think I mixed up deferred and referred for a decade. So as long as you beat that, you're going to be fine. So we now have Councillor Corser's amendment withdrawn. Councillor Morales, can you put yours on the floor?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I am putting it on the floor as sent in the next 3 seconds with just those revisions, so it's a little bit cleaner. We may still need to edit it, but now we can have everybody jump in. So if you'll bear with me, it's been sent.
Someone remind me to bring my phone to council next time. Yeah. Yes, I've got it. Thank you. All right. So the amendment that Councilor Morales has just put on the floor, I believe, is that staff report back to General Committee with the costing analysis of separated bike lanes on existing collector arterial and higher order roads. That staff cease the implementation of new line-painted bike lanes on all road types yet to be built, planned, or unplanned until the memo in Section 1 comes back to City Council. That if the report finds there's no additional cost to implement separated bike lanes, the separated bike lanes be implemented as part of the Grove Street and Duckworth Street projects. And 4, that if the cost to provide separated bike lanes comes at an additional cost, the staff propose to General Committee low-cost safety measures to provide additional protection to painted bike lanes on Duckworth and Grove Street. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Now, Councillor Courser, I'm going to go back to you because I think that you had an amendment to
The
Councillor
amendment.
Morales' amendment. You guys traded places there.
It's like who's on first?
Exactly.
My question was to the wording of item 4 on the amendment. That if the cost to provide separated bike lanes comes at an additional cost, the staff proposed to General Committee low-cost safety measures to provide additional protection to painted bike lanes on Duckworth and Grove Street. What is low cost? If the cost to provide separated bike lanes comes at an additional cost, well, I'm like I always say, I have literal skin in the game with a young child with a bike. So it's an investment to me that needs to be made. It's an investment in community safety. What is an additional cost? What is cost prohibitive? And at lowest cost safety measures. What are we talking about additional costs? Like, it just seems like a little, I know that Councillor Morales just put that together excellently, but I just wanted a little more clarity and comprehension on what that looks like for low cost and additional costs. Does that make sense?
May I, Councillor Courser, I think that where your issue is with the low cost. Yeah. So if the staff proposed to General Committee costed safety measures to provide additional protection, I think that we're allowing a fulsome set of opportunities for staff to come back rather than just subjecting it to the lowest cost option right off the bat. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Are you okay with that? So just costed instead of low cost? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go over to Councillor Harvey, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Ritma. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. More of a comment in regards to procedural here, because at the beginning of this term, we came out with a process when it came to new motions coming forward with new items. And the last 2 amendments that we've been dealing with are not just dealing with just the matter that's on the floor. It's been talking about citywide things. So I'm just reluctant that we're allowing members of council to circumvent the process that was created at the beginning of this council term for a particular reason, because we ran into these issues last term, and that's why this new process was brought in. And in my opinion, the first 2 do circumvent the system that was adopted this term, and I'm not quite sure that that's appropriate, because if we allow it once, it's just going to continue time after time. I really appreciate the comments and the whole discussion around public safety and everything else. I've seen these things firsthand, especially on the side of Highway 7 in Vaughan. I'm just reluctant about supporting this because it's supporting something that is circumventing the process that we adopted not that long ago.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harvey. The people who are worst at following the rules are the ones that make them. And I think that I actually brought this up in terms of the citywide. So I apologize for taking us down that road. We do have motions on the floor, though, so your comments have been taken. I think then it's up to General Committee to make the determinations on that. I'm going to jump over to Councillor Ritma, then Councillor Harris, then Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just reflecting on Councillor Harvey's last comment, and certainly not intended to circumvent anything. The motion that was put forward by staff, the report was to do with bike lanes, and you know, the amendments kind of flow directly from that. I'm very much in support of what Councillor Morales has put forward. I think it's very straightforward and gives clear direction as to where we're going with this. And I do think that we need to move this forward, and I think this amendment does that very nicely. So I'm in support with it.
Thank you, Councillor Ritma. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Morales.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Noddle. And I see that Councillor Morales has sent an update, and I do think we're going into a great area of conversation around how to make the best, the safest infrastructure for cycling that we can, and separating bike lanes seems like a good way to go. My one question, I know we've made some comments and given some personal assessments of our understanding of how safe or unsafe a painted bike lane is. I'm of the generation that didn't have bike lanes, period. Didn't get my license until I was about 28. I drove these city streets on my bike for a long time, believe me. So I know what it's like not even to have grates pointing the right direction and your tire go in them. It's not good. So maybe, Mr. Greatix, you could give us a little bit more detail on the rationale and the reasoning and the evidence behind the painted bike lane. And I think one thing we may have missed in the conversation, which I know it irritates people, is one of the features when you put the painted bike lane is you get rid of the on-street parking, which takes away the slalom you have to do around parked cars. Believe me, increases safety. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about the value in the safety of the painted bike lane. What is the evidence there? And how much of that calculation of safety is weighted in the removal of the parking restriction, which also creates visibility issues for cars coming out of driveways, the slalom I have to do on my bike when I go down the street. So there's a number of items that actually the painted bike lane does improve safety, but I'm no expert and I haven't read the reports, the data, the evidence on this. I wonder if you could give us some more information on the real data on this or evidence on this type of tool. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. I think it's good just to step back for a second. Staff at the engineering level on a go-forward basis are already adopting OTM Book 18, which is the design standard for cycling facilities. So on our multi-lane roads, greater than 3 lanes, it's without question, if we have a new project going forward, it's separated facilities. That will be happening. If it's less than 3 lanes, we'll be looking at it with clear messaging that separated facilities is preferred. Where we're still looking to implement cycling lanes, and we're always, we'll act on council's direction, but the current thought process is we have roads, and again, the Grove Street and Blake Street project, the actual construction portion is just a segment of what we're recommending. The remainder of the road's not being touched, so that might be getting lost a little bit. So if we think of these roads as not having really anything happening to them, we still see value in putting in cycling lanes to create an incremental improvement in safety. This won't be a paradigm shift for the least confident riders. It won't be a paradigm shift for having children on cyclists at all. But for those that were comfortable in mixed traffic previously, it helps raise the bar a little bit. And with the costs associated with what we're proposing with the line painting approach, we still feel there's value in that, and that's outlined in the staff report. As far as your other question about just the safety of on-road cycling lanes, with removal of parked cars, yes, so that helps with the visibility. It does create a clear space. And I think there's also some consideration that when you do move facilities off-road, it's not a perfect solution either. You're introducing new risks that you didn't have previously. I'm not saying once the off-road is likely on the whole better, but there are still risks. You have risks with cars backing up in less sight lines. You have risks with conflicts with walkers and dogs, things like that. But we are moving away from that on-road facility type. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just maybe one final comment. My general routes are from Clover Avenue to Shanty Bay, and I can tell you with confidence that in those areas where there's a painted bike lane, I do feel much better. I will tell you my other route that generally takes me out to Friday Harbor, same thing. And actually, you head out that way, if you go down Big Bay Point Road, eventually the road that is now Innisfail they have very little shoulder, which is actually much more dangerous. The Barrie side is actually better. So does that amount of room make a difference? As somebody who does some cycling, I would say yes. So I don't want to throw that out with the bathwater. I do agree that having the best possible cycling infrastructure that we can and moving forward makes sense. But I would defer to our active transportation leaders, our cycling community, and recognize that there is utility and value and safety in using the painted bike lanes, although not perfect. I wouldn't want to not use that tool as we try to advance other tools that are for new roads. So I'll leave that in my comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris, and I believe Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Councillor Rima, earlier you had said Councillor Morales' motion. I just want to clarify, and I'm not just trying to be symbolic. This is by no means my motion. There's no way this would have gotten to this point. People have tried for decades, for years. Some people walked so we could run now, and we're near the end. So, Councillor Harvey, I agree with you about process, and if I ever do anything close to this, please call me out once, twice, and 3 times, because I won't. But especially from the comments, how this went from Duckworth and Grove to the greater conversation, the comment from Bala about just moving forward to the city. Now's the time to address this. And while I respect the comments I've heard about, take a painted bike lane if it's a marginal improvement. The issue with marginal improvements for high confidence drivers, cyclists, is that it creates unsafe conditions for low confidence cyclists, such as young people, such as new beginners, and it almost gives them a false sense of security. I really wish we had easy access to getting pictures up on the screen, but just go on Twitter, painted bike lanes. You'll see kids, small 8-year-old kids, you'll see trucks right beside it parked and say, is this the infrastructure we're creating? So not trying to be dramatic, but going back to the conversation and the incredible point that Mayor Nuttall drilled home is if we're doing road diets, let's do road diets. It doesn't have to be a painted bike. You could just spray paint the side, bring it out, put planters, concrete planters, or do proper separated bike lanes. But when you create painted bike lanes that are not proper safe infrastructure, or almost you're giving people that false sense of security. I want to jump on a point that Mr. Batrick said. I'm jumping on the point, not on the staffer. Specifically, opportunities where those roads where there's an opportunity, I believe he was alluding to 3 lanes, where it's a good opportunity to slow down traffic. Think about it for a second. What's slowing down traffic? The reduction in asphalt width. And what's abutting that asphalt width? People who are riding bikes. All it takes is that quick check of the cell phone or the quick adjustment of the radio. The steering wheel follows where you go. And the bumper, when you're playing bowling, the bumpers on the sides, it's the non-protected bike lanes. It is the people using these bike lanes that are potentially, literally the buffers. So that is why I share the concerns about doing it right, or at the very least what this amendment is doing is putting a pause on it until we get the memo. I haven't heard so far that this memo is going to take a year. So we're just putting a pause. We're not stopping it necessarily. And if it comes back and it says, no, every single one of your projects is going to escalate 300% per kilometer, then we're going to have a serious conversation and maybe implement number 4, which is the, not low cost, but the more practical one. So let's have that conversation, but I just wanted to at least pause it for staff to come back. just so we can really shift that culture. Because there might be an opportunity to do a hybrid, painted bike lanes with additional protection measures in instances such as have been referenced before.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Maybe one question back to Mr. Arrhenius-Senderin and/or through you to Brett, Mr. Greatrix. I'm just looking at the language, and I'm wondering about the impact in paragraph 2. I'm assuming you have it in front of you, if staff have received it. Okay. Because it does talk a bit about until the memo comes back, and then ceasing to implement painted bike lanes. Is there a forecast about the earliest, a time frame the earliest that a memo would come back?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle. At this time, I would say it would take us at least 3 months for the memo to come back.
May I ask, in light of my assumption is, and that's just from what I believe I understood to be when we were doing Livingston and Hammer, that those painted bike lanes were really coming online when we were doing the road resurfacing because it was cost effective to paint at that time from an operations standpoint. So is it safe to say then within that 3-month period of time, we're not really missing or going to incur future cost about missing the painting of a bike lane because we've said a pause overall on all lanes?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle. I think that's generally true, keeping in mind that painting bike lanes aren't a large cost item, so we can definitely pause it. Keeping in mind we do have some contracts, such as Duckworth, which have already been tendered, but again, we can pause it because it is a low-cost item, but that also justifies the flip side, where you could say, because it's a low-cost item, it's better than not having painted lanes.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to point that out, too. It works both ways.
Yeah, so my only hesitation, and is that I would rather see painted lines as a visible barrier, because whether there's painted lanes or not, ideally if someone's going to ride their bike, we're expecting people to be able to share the road. So for me, I think it's about managing expectations and minimizing judgment about what is safety and for whom. And if it's there, then at least are we inviting it? Because I do believe, at least the nice thing in the winter for residents that do adopt the bike as their main mode of transportation, that I think there are standards when you have a bike lane that's painted, there is a snowplow standard of clearance that has to happen. So we do have that availability, and we are permitting individuals to actually, throughout the winter, still choose their bike, which individuals have done. So for me, I just don't want to see it as we're reducing at least something that we're doing at minimum, which is inviting and giving a signal to say cycling matters, and we want to at least provide a dedicated space that people should be very clear exists on that road. So as long as we're not going down the path while saying we're pausing it, we're missing opportunities, and then later not even coming back to kind of saying, oh, we should probably put painted lanes there because we would have otherwise, but because we held it, we've missed an opportunity we would have done otherwise. So I guess I'm not hearing from staff that there's a risk to that, but I would say, my understanding in voting in favor of this is that the intention is that we're not missing out on bike lanes that otherwise have been dedicated and identified in the report.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle. I think the way the second motion is worded, it's I think very definite in the sense that it's asking us to seize. So maybe some flexibility there would allow us to still move ahead with any projects that are at an advanced stage to stay with the painted bike lanes. But again, that's at the discretion of council. That would be up to council to decide.
Thank you.
Do you want no painted bike lanes, or do you want painted bike lanes until we are ready to implement separated bike lanes?
I think you know how I feel, but I appreciate that reflection about how staff would interpret that in the intention. So I'll look back to Councillor Morales. For me, I would support it if it would be changing the language in sentence 2 or removing it for now. So work will continue, knowing that a memo is coming back anyways in 3 months. Would you be open to that?
If I may, through you, Mayor Nettle, quickly. Based on the discussion and understanding that politics is the art of the compromise, I wasn't even planning on doing any of this, Claire. I'm Mayor Nettle. I will remove paragraph 2. I don't believe that affects any of the other paragraphs.
Okay, and on that, if I may then say thank you, Councillor Morales, and then back to you, Mr. Arrhenius-Sundren. Does that meet the intention that we just talked about around staff proceeding but not having any other unintended impacts around how you move forward with bringing back a memo?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Congo, yeah, I would agree that that allows us to move forward with some of the planned projects.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. While the debate was going on here, I was having a look at MTO Book 18 just to see what this is all about. And actually, the one thing that, and I know downtown Toronto does it, we don't do it here, but has staff ever considered, instead of putting the lanes on both sides of the road, having them merge together so that way everything is on one side of the road and then potentially whatever barriers involved, you're only having to deal with it on one side of the road instead of having it on both sides of the road. Plus, too, it would actually create a wider path, because I would suspect that we're still going to maintain these things in the winter, and it would provide a wider path and probably something a little bit easier for a pickup truck type snowplow to be able to clear during the winter months, if there's any brave cyclists out there in the winter. Just curious if staff's ever considered that avenue of a double lane.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, I'll invite Brett Greatrix to respond to that.
Through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Harvey. In the context of the streets we're speaking to, Grove and Blake, the transportation planning community would typically shy away from a two-way facility due to the number of driveway conflicts. We typically see that facility where there's either an urban cores where there still may be some mid-block for servicing into a building, but it's more defined block to block, or if you are on a well-defined arterial with really great access management. The driveway conflicts is kind of what shies away from that type of facility.
Yeah, thank you. And follow up to that, I assume that's probably why we don't see these divided lanes on the road with barriers, because obviously you've got several driveways to contend with, and I guess the only way to defeat that would to have these elevated bike lanes adjacent to a sidewalk. Would that be correct?
With a two-way elevated cycle track, you're still in that kind of situation, so it's still relatively context specific. A Blake or a Grove Street, we'd likely still push towards a one-way unidirectional facility cycle track. Each side adjacent to the sidewalk would be the likely facility type. Just trying to give an example, Mapleview Drive, for example, from Peroni Road out towards the city limits, that's where there's really great access control, few intersecting streets, where you have more flexibility for two-way facilities. There's less expectancy violation issues with just those driveways and poor sight lines. So that's something where a two-way facility would be more appropriate on a road like that.
And I guess the other thing that would probably work in that area that you just mentioned would be similar to what we have on Mapleview West, where instead of a typical sidewalk, we have those multi-use paved pathways. But again, I'll just leave my comments at that. I want to belabor this. I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on these two-way paths. Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments or questions?
I just one.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. It's just I just didn't see it sent in another email. That low cost was changed to costing? Costed, sorry. Okay, yeah, that's all. So that we'll be able to compare apples to apples, the cost of the separated to the cost of the lower barriers. Perfect. Thank you.
Through Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Morales, I just want to clarify something before you move forward. Would you be fine if we put paragraphs 3 and 4 as an A and B to Councillor Rima's amendment? Because that's kind of where they make sense to land.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now call the vote on the amendment to the main motion. Those in favor on my right and on my left. It carries. On the main motion as amended, I'm going to assume there's no more comments. Those in favor on my right and on my left. And that's approved. Yeah. I'm never holding a bike lane again. Actually, that was you, Councillor Rittman. I'm not going to take responsibility for that. Councillor Negussi, DEV 021-23.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have an amendment.
Yes.
I'm going to read it as follows. That the staff report concerning the confidential litigation matter regarding on Ontario Land Tribunal matter Isarod will be deferred to the General Committee meeting to be scheduled for May 3rd, 2023 to allow for further discussion with the proponents on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Negussi. There's an amendment on the floor to defer this motion to the General Committee meeting on May the 3rd, which I believe will be next Wednesday. Are there any questions or comments on the exact motion? This is a confidential item, so we can't get into it in public. We'd have to go on camera to go into the rest of it. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. Councillor Morales, FIN 004-23, the 2023 Downtown Barrie Business Association levy.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put it on the floor as printed, and I may have a couple of surface questions for staff. The only reason I held it was I just noticed there's certain sections in the budget. So if councillors want to pull it up, click on the report. I'm looking at page 6. So on page 6, under marketing communication, just noticing little things. Again, very surface. Website, social media went from a budgeted and spent of $6,090 now to $49,000. So that's an 800% increase on that. It might just be a simple question and answer. I've tried messaging the executive director because, again, I don't want to delay this if it's not necessary. But then again, I know they're going to come and present to us. So I just want to confirm with Mr. Miller, through you, Mayor Nuttall. Mr. Miller, it's my understanding that we need this budget passed by, sorry, let me just check my notes. We need this budget passed by May 17th to meet legislative deadlines. So could General Committee right now theoretically defer this until May 10th, at which time we would have had a presentation from the executive director?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales, yes, that would be the absolute deadline that we could, Council would have to approve their budget on the 17th to ensure we could meet our deadlines to tax the levy in the BI area. So any later than that, we wouldn't be able to.
Okay. And they're going to present on the...
Next Wednesday, I believe.
Next Wednesday. So I just want to...
Through Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Morales, they are presenting at City Council next week. The presentation would take place after the motion would be considered for their levy, because presentations are, of course, towards the end of the meeting.
Now, we could at the meeting just
amend it if we don't get it satisfied. I don't like that dynamic.
Yeah.
It's awkward. But I understand.
It's also pretty tight the other way, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you have a concern that you've outlined in terms of wanting some information, I think members of council, because of the timing, probably be okay with that presentation happening before we actually vote it. We've done it in the past.
Okay.
Actually, when I believe it was our last city council meeting, we had the presentations moved up the agenda.
Okay. So how's this? I'll just let it go now, and we vote on it. I'll ask for a separate report, and then if the presentation is able to be right-sized, then all shall be well.
Councilor Morales, if you can remind me, that would be fantastic.
Okay, perfect.
Are there any other questions or comments on the matter? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved.
Separate report.
And a separate report's being requested, Madam Clerk. Has that been noted?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you. We will now go to FIN 005-23. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed. I have one question through you to staff. The deferral of the capital is, our biggest risk is basically the cost associated by delaying things and stuff, would you say? That's some of our concern here.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Deputy Mayor Thompson. So the report is making recommendations to defer forecasted projects to ensure that our reserves are kind of healthy over the next few years. Having said that, when staff bring forward the 2024 capital plan, a recommended capital plan, there will be an opportunity, to reprioritize those projects or more. So the projects that are being deferred, there's not approved spending on those projects, so it's not like they were happening this year. And again, it's just to make sure that our reserves are presented in a bit of healthier state right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. I'll be very quick on this. I think that this is another sign to me that the amount of spending that has been done on the capital side to support growth for future development has left us in a position where we don't have the dollars to deal with what we already have. And we need to remember that. We talked about it during the budget time. We need to remember that week in and week out. There is a, dare I say it, DERF, because I don't like the acronym, that we have in place that's had 2% this year, that we've publicly committed to having 2% for the next couple of years to be able to catch up on these items. But we have to make sure the dollars are spent where we're telling people the dollars are spent. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be pushing off projects that are either on the streets or in front of the homes of our existing residents to subsidize people from moving out of town here. And that still doesn't make sense to me 6 months later. So that was my only comments on the matter, and I really do want us to make sure that we're disciplined when it comes to our capital plan going forward. If it means that we have to slow down some things on growth, then we'll have to slow down some things on growth. But we shouldn't be growing at the expense of our current citizenry. Are there any other questions or comments on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson, LCS 007-23.
You said the budget. I was looking.
It's the establishing a lobbyist registry and appointment of a lobbyist registrar. I can't believe you haven't memorized that yet.
I'll put the motion on the floor as printed and I have a couple amendments. Some are just housekeeping. And so the first amendment is in paragraph 1 to be changed, effective date from September 1, 2023 to January 1st, 2024. To amend paragraph 1, Appendix A, paragraph 6.1 as followed, that the time identified in paragraph 6.1 for a former public office holder to be able to lobby the city to be amended from 1 year to 6 months. To amend paragraph 5 to remove the funding requirements for lobbyist registry in 2023, and to add, Madam Clerk, would that be in 2024 because we changed the start date? Sorry.
Through you, Mayor Nettle, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. In paragraph 5, there was a note for funding for 2023. We just need to remove that portion, and also paragraph 5 also speaks to funding for 2024 and how it will be identified.
Okay, sorry. And then the following paragraph to be added, that the city clerk investigate the feasibility of adding special interest groups to these groups required to register as lobbyists as their lobbying activities are report back to General Committee before November 2023. And I can speak to any one of them.
So the motions on the floor and the amendments on the floor, I believe, Deputy Mayor Thompson. So if you'd like to speak to them, then go ahead.
The first one was just a housekeeping item, as IT will need to support this, and it gives them a little bit of time. The amendment, the 6 months, I think a blackout period of 6 months is sufficient. I think that any concern that we have within that period will be accomplished in 6 months. And then the funding one was self-explanatory. And with the special interest groups, the reason why I wanted this added is that the lobby registry as it is right now is the businesses, the builders, the developers, the landlords. They need to go through the lobby registry to lobby council, where they would have, their lobbying, our policies and procedures, and there could be a cost inhibit to the city occurred. Well, special interest groups do the same thing. They can, they lobby council, which can in turn, change our policies. So I don't see there being an issue with this, because they say what they want to say now out in public. They just have to register it. So they're my comments on my amendments.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the amendment to the main motion on the floor? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nettle. I'll definitely support this, and I do agree with your last comments there when it comes to the special interest groups. Regardless of it being a paid lobbyist or a volunteer lobbyist, it really doesn't matter, because they're still there as a lobbyist. So it's definitely was something that I picked up on earlier, and I'm happy to see that the amendment came forward, because I think it needs to be an even playing field for everybody. Whether you're getting paid to do that job or not, it's kind of a moot point in my world. So thank you for the amendment, and definitely support it.
Councilor Morales?
Mayor Nettle, very quickly, I'll be supporting the amendment. Number one, huge kudos to the confidence to put 4 amendments together in one. You're rolling the dice. I like that. I would have moved it one by one.
I'll remind you that you just did that in the last motion.
That doesn't feel like that happened. I've been holding on to those for months. Okay, and the second one is, I like your last amendment, and here's why. If your amendment wasn't on the floor, the list of people, because I'm sure there's going to be some sort of public reporting of this, the list for Ward 10, 9, and 7 would have looked so bad, because it's all this new growth land, and developers constantly asking us either active applications or prospective applications, and other words, and I'm not going to pick on other words, but that don't have as much volume, would have just looked very, quote unquote, my words, clean, or not as possibly misconstrued. So I think this levels the playing field, because again, we're being, our opinions and our influence are being lobbied and sourced by many different sources, and even not-for-profits. There may be changes to policy, BIAs, chambers, sandboxes. So those things need to also be on the table. And I'm also having conversations with those organizations, but I happen to have hundreds of acres in my ward that are ready for shovels. So this levels the playing field, and I'll be supporting.
Any other questions or comments? I'll speak to the motion. I get nervous when we start legislating the who instead of legislating the what. So when I looked at this, I thought, okay, perfect. This is actually what I'd asked for, because this is in response to a motion that I put forward. I went through it a second time. It was only in my jet-lagged third time that I actually realized, okay, well, hold on. This is kind of creating two sets of people, in the sense that those who lobby and have to tell everyone about it, and those who lobby and don't have to tell anyone about it. And I am a big believer that the only dirty lobbying that happens is the lobbying that no one talks about. So if somebody wants to have a conversation with me, I hope they're willing to put their name behind it in writing in front of the public. If they're not going to, don't have the conversation with me. And that doesn't matter whether it's a builder, developer, a social service organization, a chamber of commerce, any of them, and all of them. And so for me, I think it's actually a really good thing. And when you know, Councillor Morales, you just said the Chamber of Commerce. You know, if I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, which I have been in the past, I'd want to know those conversations are taking place. I want to see the work that's being done. I want to know that if there's something that's affecting small business around the city, that my organization that I spend money on to be a member of is doing that work on our behalf. So I wholeheartedly agree with this, and I will wait to see what comes back in from the clerk's office on this. But I really do believe that it's got to be an even playing field. Let's not create multiple sets of governance for multiple sets of people. And I'm going to just say something on the main motion, I guess, which will be as amended, that what we're doing here is a big step forward, right? And it's a big step forward for transparency in Barrie, and it will last. And there'll be times where it feels difficult because you'll get questions about what you were lobbied about and how you were lobbied. That's just all part of a proper democratic political process taking place. It's when we aren't providing that information that we should be scared. So on the amendment that's been put forth by Deputy Mayor Thompson, all those in favor? And it carries. On the main motion, are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And it carries. We're now going to go to LCS 009-23, which is actually going to be a confidential matter, which will take place in the Sir Robert Barrie room when we're done the rest of our in-public agenda. There's no new information items, number 9, so we're on to inquiries. Number 10, Deputy Mayor Thompson, do you have any inquiries? Are there any inquiries from members of General Committee? Seeing none, we will go to announcements. Councillor Kungle, and then Councillor Courser.
Thank you. One announcement, we've got a neighborhood pre-application public consultation happening on Tuesday, May the 2nd in Ward 3. It's happening at 5 p.m. virtually, so please join by Zoom. This is specific to 290 Cundles Road East. We'll hear from a developer. For those interested, just as a reminder, because I know we talk about process quite a bit, no decisions are being made at the meeting, but it's a great opportunity for residents to join in the conversation, hear what's being proposed, ask questions, and those questions will be captured in a report that will be sent to the developer to answer or address. So this is, again, being looked at 20 back-to-back townhouses, and that's on 290 Cundles Road East. And you can register for the Zoom link for Tuesday, May the 2nd for 5 p.m. And I think I'm going to look at Councillor Harris to see if you're queued up. Go. Can you come back to me? I don't have that one in front of me. Okay. Do you have
Councillor Courser, and then we'll come back to Councillor Kung.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just staying up myself, if that's okay.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Kungle.
I can go. So yeah, we have exciting news.
from our Barrie Trojan Swim Club. They have had 5 swimmers participated in the 2023 Bell Canadian Swimming Trials that happened on March 28th to April 2nd. And they did a fantastic job. And 2 swimmers and their head coach have been named to represent Canada at the upcoming international events. Leila Oravsky has been named to the Pan American Game teams to compete in Santiago, Chile in October of this year. Leila, Jordi Vilches, and Andy Babi, head coach, will be part of the Canadian team competing at the World Aquatics Junior Swimming Championships taking place in Israel this coming September. So congratulations to our Barrie Trojans and the success that you've had with your recent trials. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. On behalf of Councillor Kungle. Are there any other announcements? Councillor Corser.
Okay, this is just a reminder that this Wednesday, May 3rd, join me for the 2nd annual Flores Walk in support of Canadian Perinatal Mental Health. Sorry, I'm having a little problem with my screen here. Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative, a nonprofit organization working to remove the stigma, fear of judgment, isolation, and lack of resources that contribute to many parents suffering with postpartum depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues while pregnant or caring for a new baby. So it's the 2nd annual Flores Walk, and we're going to be meeting at Meridian Place downtown at 11:30 a.m. and we'll have some speakers, and then we'll have a walk, and it will be really wonderful, and I hope you all join me.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I've put together a roundtable discussion with my residents in the North End on May 2nd at 7 o'clock at Lampman Community Center. Lampman Lane Community Center, sorry. Just for some of the behaviors that are going on in the park and some of the issues at school. So we have some school representatives, some teachers, the principal, a trustee, police will be there. So if anybody would like to attend. And Mayor Nuttall will be there also. So thank you.
With regards to the written announcements, I'm going to warn you that May is a mouthful when it comes to Awareness Month. April 18th is, the month of May is being dedicated for the Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month, Jewish Heritage Month, Guillain-Barré Syndrome, Chronic Inflammatory Demyelinating Polyneuropathy Awareness Month, and Community Living Month. May 1st to 7th as Mental Health Week, and May 3rd as World Maternal Health. Registration for the city's summer recreation programs open Tuesday, May 2nd at 8 a.m. Customers can currently browse offerings at play.barrie.ca and save them to their wish list to conveniently find desired programs when registration opens. The Recreation and Culture Services Department has a number of key programming, rental, and special event activities taking place during the month of May. The larger planning events include the Beer and Taco Festival, the Monster Truck Spectacular event, and Pickleball Ontario's regional qualifier leading to the provincial championships. For further information, visit barrie.ca/community recreation environment/recreation programs. The city is celebrating National Youth Week with free and low-cost opportunities for Barrie's youth starting May 1st and will run until the National Child and Youth Mental Health Day on May 7th. For a full schedule of opportunities, please visit barrie.ca/youthweek. The Affordable Housing Symposium will be held on Thursday, May 4th from 4 to 8 p.m. at the South Shore Community Center. The symposium is free to attend and will include a documentary screening, affordable housing partners and organizations, and panel discussion. Visit barrie.ca/affordable housing to share your thoughts on the city's affordable housing strategy update and to register. Nominations are now open for the 5th Annual Mayor's Innovation Awards, celebrating the year's most creative solutions from businesses, individuals, and local community groups. The year's award theme is Beyond the New Normal, and nominations are open to Barrie businesses, organizations, and individuals from all sectors, stages, and sizes. The submission deadline is May 28th. Visit investbarrie.ca/innovation awards for further information and to submit a nomination. The next Community Safety Committee and City Council meetings will be held Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. Before we move to the circulation list, if I can just have your indulgence for one moment. I'm sorry, I seem to have missed an item, which is April 28th as a National Day of Mourning for work-related accidents. And there's a walk that takes place here every year, maybe not during COVID, but every year. And I believe that I'll actually be attending that again this year. And unfortunately, we all hear about these accidents far too often, just terrible occurrences. With the announcements complete, we'll move on to the circulation list. Are there any comments regarding items on the circulation list dated April the 19th, 2023? Seeing none, are there any items with regards to the April 26th, 2023 circulation list? Councillor Kungl.
More of a comment, and I know you alluded to it in a bit, but ever impressive. So A2 230426 from Mr. Dan Bell, Director of Rec and Culture Services, regarding the winter events recap, but then also the following memo around May events calendar. So as you listed off some events, though, there are a slew of events, and I've never seen, I think, the number of draws that we're having, both at East Bayfield Community Centre in Ward 3 and at other areas. So I would just wanted to echo kudos to the team that's really leveraging our facilities to bring people in, not just for sports and rec, but for other ways in which to create community engage. Ever impressive, and I really do hope residents take the opportunity to get out and enjoy some of what the city is offering through our rec facilities and other venues. So thank you to Mr. Bell and the team.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. Are there any other comments or questions or motions with regards to the circulation list from the 26th of April? Councillor Morales?
Thank you. Mayor Nettle, quick question. Remember last meeting where I wanted to hold the memo from Access Barrie on the KPIs, and we said this is the next week where we're doing that? Okay.
This is.
Awesome. So I'd like to do that, and so we can refer that specific memo on KPIs to the Mayor's Priority and Planning Task Force.
Motion's on the floor. All those in favor? And it carries.
Thank you, actually, Councillor Morales, for reminding me, because I wanted to refer back that to the Community Safety Committee as well. Am I not allowed to do that?
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mayor Nettle, we generally only refer things to one committee at a time. So if Councillor Corser wants to reach out to staff directly about her question, maybe she might want to raise her question this evening concerning the memo.
That would be fantastic. I shall do that. I'll reach out to staff, and I understand that these come down to the, still learning process. I understand that these are going to come down to the committees anyway, so I'll have a fulsome conversation about that at that time. Wonderful. All right, I'm done.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Are there any other items on the circulation list? Seeing none, we will now move, or General Committee will now move into closed session to discuss the confidential item that's been held, which is the confidential personal information matter appointment to the International Relations Committee. Can I get a motion to move into closed session? It's moved by Councillor Kungl, seconded by Councillor Rittma. All those in favor? It carries. We will now move into closed session in the Sir Robert Barrie Room.
We will be following this story closely and providing updates on the bike lane discussions as more information emerges from the Barrie City Hall. Stay tuned for more local news and developments. Thank you.